everywhere. Now, Peter Schweizer, the McConnell-Chow connection, husband-wife, is absolutely breathtaking in the relationship with the official Chinese government. But so, too, is the relationship between Joe Biden's son and the Chinese government and John Kerry's stepson. Can you fill us in on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear cut. Between 2013 and 2016, while John Kerry is Secretary of State and Joe Biden is Vice President are negotiating with the Chinese, their sons and a close Kerry aide are closing lucrative commercial deals with the Chinese government. And it gets kicked off, Mark, in December of 2013 when Joe Biden flies on Air Force Two to Beijing. He's there to talk about a lot of issues, the South China Sea, trade, economic issues, etc. Well, with him on Air Force Two is his son, Hunter Biden. And after that trip, Joe Biden is criticized in the Asian press for basically being soft on Beijing. He doesn't really challenge them on anything. 10 days after they come back from that trip, Hunter Biden, who has a small firm called Rosemont Seneca, scores a $1 billion deal. That's with a B, a $1 billion deal with the Chinese government, a private equity deal. And this involves him, and it involves the Rosemont entity. And Rosemont, the name Rosemont, is the name of the Kerry, Teresa Heinz Kerry, and John Kerry estate in Pennsylvania. And they basically invest money for the Chinese government. There are two other deals. The other one is something called a Rosemont.
All right, let me slow you.
Sure.
So, $1 billion deal involving Joe Biden's son in this hedge fund called Rosemont.
Right.
And what exactly is Hunter Biden's background in hedge funds?
It's zero. When his father was picked to be Barack Obama's running mate in 2008, he was a lobbyist, and he was doing lobbying work for the casino industry. So he has no background in private equity whatsoever.
And the Chinese cough up $1 billion to invest in his firm?
That's right. In fact, they later, 6 months later, expanded to $1.5 billion. And this is, again, all going on while his father is a point person on policy towards China.
And his father's going soft on China, too, just like McConnell.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I quote in the book, I lay it out, Japan, the Philippines, all these allies are critical because at this time, December 2013, Mark, it's when China has made their territorial claim in the South China Sea. And everybody is concerned about this flexing of muscles. Joe Biden goes to Beijing and rolls over for them. And everybody's kind of mystified. I think one of the reasons he rolls over is what happens 10 days after they return when his son, with no background in private equity, scores this $1 billion deal from the Chinese government. This is important. This is not an American company doing business in China. This is not a, Chinese company that's kind of run. This is the Chinese government itself giving $1 billion to this Rosemont Seneca entity that he has set up, and that includes Devin Archer, who's a longtime Kerry aide, who was co-finance chairman of his 2004 campaign, and you've got Chris Heinz, the stepson, who's also involved. You've got these two other deals with the Chinese government that follow, all at the time that John Kerry and Joe Biden are negotiating with the Chinese government.
John Kerry's stepson, what's his role?
Well, his role is really as an investor. He puts up half the money for Rosemont Seneca Partners, which is kind of the vehicle that gets this going. But he's also involved in the third deal that occurs. It's called Rosemont Realty. This is a real estate firm that he has invested in. Again, Rosemont is the name of the Kerry Heinz estate. And the Chinese come in and buy 75% of the company. And what's interesting about this transaction, Mark, is Rosemont Realty becomes Gemini Rosemont Realty. People can look it up online. What's interesting about Gemini, Mark, is this is a company that is linked to Costco, which is this large Chinese conglomerate you might recall in the 90s, was involved in all this military activity, and is regarded as the fifth arm of the Chinese Navy. So it's not only a Chinese government entity, it's linked to the Chinese military, and they buy part of Rosemont Realty where Chris Heinz is an owner.
So I assume these young men are very, very wealthy right now.
I think they are. I think that, look, these deals are lucrative. Part of the problem is we don't know exactly how much money they've made. This is how crazy this is, and this is why I called the book Secret Empires, Mark. Think about Joe Biden for a second. If he gets a $1,000 campaign contribution, he has to disclose that. If he has $1,000 in General Electric stock, he has to disclose that. If his son gets a $1 billion deal from a foreign government, the Chinese government, no disclosure requirements. That's why these secret empires are so troubling, and they have to be dealt with.
Now, in addition to their sons, you said there was a campaign co-chairman of the John Kerry for President campaign. What happened to him?
Well, his name is Devin Archer, and he actually got arrested in 2016 on another scheme that I talk about in the book that Hunter Biden very well could be involved in. This was a scheme, believe it or not, Mark, to bilk the poorest Indian tribe in America, the Oglala Sioux of South Dakota, in a fraudulent bond deal, a $60 million bond deal. He was arrested in 2016, and he's going to be going on trial in about 8 weeks on those charges. So Mr. Archer has got big problems beyond just doing these deals with China.
Is this something for the ethics committee to investigate, or this is the sort of thing they do investigate, or where do we go from here?
Well, I will say, and I think probably you'll be hearing more about this in a week or so. I've had people from Capitol Hill reach out that are interested in having the House Oversight Committee look into this. I think it has to be looked into, and this is the trend of the future, Mark. I mean, we can forget about, Congressman Jefferson, who had the $90,000 cash in his freezer. $90,000 is chump change. These are large, massive deals involving foreign governments, and unless we get a handle of this, it is completely undermining the decision-making we have in this country because, look, they are by nature, with these commercial ties with the Chinese government, going to be softer on China. There's no way that it cannot influence their decision-making process.
And China is a huge problem. I mean, China is stealing our technology left and right. It's forcing companies, American companies in China, to cough up their technology with these phony partnerships with state-run Chinese companies. They're also stealing our technology through cyber warfare and on-the-ground spies and so forth. We can't treat China as just a trading partner, and we can't allow these politicians with these lucrative links through family members to China to get away with it, quite frankly. And here we have the Republican leader in the United States Senate, based on your reporting.
Yep.
He and his in-laws, and through his in-laws, him, of course he's going to be looking over his shoulder when he's making decisions about the United States' position on China. How can he not be?
That's exactly right, Mark. And this effort that China has put forward, they are the ascendant power and rival. Russia, I get why people, focus on Putin, and Putin is not a good guy. But Russia is a declining power. China is the ascendant power. And it's amazing to me when we look at sort of the press coverage. And look, I said at the beginning that they ought to look at this whole issue of Russia collusion, when it first came out. But there's nothing there. And what's mystifying to me is they're looking at non-existent deals that never occurred, while you actually have billion-dollar deals involving a foreign government, the Chinese, and the family members of senior elected officials in Washington, D.C. And it seems to me that we ought to be looking at this stuff because it is very clearly undermining our sovereignty. And let me just give you this one illustration, by the way. The money that Hunter Biden's firm got to invest, one of the investments they made, and I write about this in the book, is in a company called CGN, China General Nuclear. And they become an anchor investor in that company. Less than a year after the vice president's son's firm invests in CGN, senior CGN officials are arrested by the Obama FBI for stealing nuclear secrets. That's how bad it's become and what they're willing to do to make a buck. They're willing to align themselves with these kinds of companies that are doing exactly what you're talking about, which is stealing our secrets and trying to gain a technological edge over the United States.
I only have a minute or two, but let me ask you this. Have the intrepid reporters at CNN